Flex up, me amuse my brand now. Fuse is lit. Just once.
Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we'll be discussing the latest 4-star Geo Polearm user, Yun Jin, who was just released in the 2.4 update. We'll be discussing things like optimal team building, artifacts, weapons, and more. Also, I'd like to mention recently I just started a Twitch channel and plan to start streaming over there this Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you'd like to check that out, I will leave a link to it in the description. I hope to see some of you guys there. Anyways, let's get into the video. Let's start off with a review of Yun Jin's kit. Yun Jin is played as a support for normal attacker carries like Yoimiya, Razor, and Eula, are just a few good examples of that idea. Essentially what Yun Jin does is she increases the DPS of your carries by a percentage of her defense. Yun Jin's normal and charge attacks aren't anything special and are only used to regen particles for crit hits for the Favonius Lance. Yun Jin's elemental skill is critical to charging her bursts. Yun Jin's skill has 3 stages: press, charge level 1, and charge level 2. The longer you hold Yun Jin's skill, the more particles you will generate and the more damage you will do based on her max defense. During the duration of her skill, she is protected with a shield that is based on her max HP and has a 150% effectiveness against all elemental and physical damage. Yun Jin's passive allows you to release the hold E early, which is similar to Beto's skill, if you are able to do a perfect parry. Last but not least, and the talent you will probably want to put the most of your resources into, is her burst. Yun Jin's burst has a grand cost total of 60 energy and a cooldown of 15 seconds. You can maintain a pretty good uptime with her burst if you have the correct energy recharge stats, because the duration is 12 seconds long. Yun Jin's burst will deal AoE geo damage and give your characters the Flying Cloud Flag Formation effect, which is the big buff to their normal attack. With Yun Jin's second passive, you can further increase this bonus by having characters with different elements on your team. Overall, with her talent, I recommend you prioritize her burst initially, and then you want to move to her skill, and unless you are going for a hybrid main DPS Yun Jin build, I wouldn't recommend leveling her normal attack.
Flags up. Your grand finale. Fire hazard.
For Yun Jin's weapon, you want any 5-star option is viable for purely dealing damage if that's the way you want to live your life, but for more practical purposes, you're going to want to equip Yun Jin with a good support weapon with ER substats like Engulfing Lightning or Skyward Spines are probably your best 5-star options, as they both have good ER substats and good passive abilities. As for the 4-star options, your best bet will be the Favonius Lance, as it has a ER substat and it has a passive that allows Yun Jin to funnel particles faster to get her burst back on cooldown. If you do not have that weapon, I suggest you get the prototype Star Glitter. It can be made in the blacksmith for a fairly low price, and it also has a solid ER substat, even though its passive does not help Yun Jin's kit that much. I've also heard that the deathmatch could be a good option since it has a defense scaling passive, but since it's still a crit rate weapon as the substat, I wouldn't suggest using it, because then you'd have to use a ER stance instead of a defense stance to get her burst back on cooldown, and then you just lose some scaling. So overall, I would suggest going for the Favonius Lance first, and then if you cannot get that, I suggest the prototype Star Glitter. Let's discuss Yun Jin's artifact sets. So for her general best in slot set, I would always recommend the 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams, as the 2-piece increases her defense by 30%, and then the 4-piece is just more defense scaling, more damage that's going to go to your normal attacks. Now if you're struggling to farm a 4-piece, as I know I was, I didn't get a lot of good pieces for the Husk of Opulent Dreams, I would recommend going for the 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, as it gives you 20% energy recharge, and energy recharge is really crucial when you're building Yun Jin, as you need to reach a threshold of maybe 200 to 240% energy recharge if you want to get her good burst uptime. So as for Yun Jin's artifact stats, you always want to prioritize the artifact stats over the sets. So even if you cannot get a 2-piece or the 4-piece husk, you always want to try to be getting either a defense or a energy recharge sands. Depends on what your energy recharge is already, and if you're running a Favonius Lance or another weapon. If you are running Favonius Lance, you probably only need a energy recharge rate, maybe 200 or 180 around there. But if you are not, I'd recommend trying to go for a energy recharge rate of either 230 or 240 would probably be good if you want to have Yun Jin's burst on cooldown constantly. As for the main stats, the feather, is always going to be flat attack. The flower is always going to be flat HP. A defense or energy recharge, as I just said, either or, whichever one you need. As for the goblet, you could run Geo damage bonus if you want to focus on Yun Jin's damage alone, but generally you want to be running a defense percent sans, so you can focus more on scaling her burst even higher. And then for the hat, so I am personally running a crit rate hat because my crit rate stats are absolute garbage and I got unlucky with some rolls, so I had to run a crit rate hat instead of a defense hat. But if you have the proper crit rate stats with Favonius Lance, I would suggest going for a defense percent hat instead. As for teams for Yun Jin, a lot of people have been suggesting this team, which is a mono pyro team, which focuses on trying to get as much DPS as possible with Yoimiya, with using Yun Jin, Kazuha, and Bennett as supports. Bennett buffs, Kazuha swirls, debuffing other characters, and Yun Jin, obviously if you have her C6, Yoimiya attacks even faster and does way more damage, but even with just her burst alone, Yoimiya is doing way more normal attack damage than she already would. This is just a team that I've been playing around with personally because I want to use both the new characters on the same team. Since Eula is a physical carry and does normal attack damage most of the time, Yun Jin and Eula work really well together, and then pairing her with Shenhe is also a really good option because Shenhe further debuffs and does more cryo damage along with Eula and can help get Eula's burst back. And then Jean is just a good healer and also a good debuffer. A good pair is Yun Jin and Razor. They work well together since Yun Jin buffs normal attack, as we said before, and Razor is a normal attack carry. As for supports for this party, it's really wishy-washy. There are a lot of good options. If you want to go for Electro Charge, you can go for characters like Kokomi, or you can go for Sing Cho. And if you want to pair them with Pyro characters to do that elemental reaction, you can use characters like Bennett or Zhongling. And then if you want to do Swirl and maybe some Geo interactions, you can always use Sucrose or maybe Zhongli or some good options there. But generally, the core of this team will always be Yun Jin and Razor. As for Yun Jin's Constellations, none of these are really necessary. I'd say Yun Jin is just as solid at C0 as she is at C6, but if you would like a solid upgrade, all of these are pretty good Constellations and not going to screw you over like Bennett C6. So for her Constellation 1, this is just going to decrease your cooldown on your E. For Constellation 2, this is just more scaling with her burst to further increase your normal attack damage. The Constellation 3 and the Constellation 5 are just more scaling for your talents. This just boosts Yun Jin's defense when she picks up crystals. And then for her C6, which is probably her best Constellation and my personal favorite, if you want to go for that, but that will cost you a fair bit. For characters with low attack speed, you can actually get their attack speed buffs by 12%, or sorry, just for any character. But I like to use this with Yoimiya personally, as I feel like she attacks kind of slow and a little sloppy. But when you use this on top of that, she attacks very fast and does a lot more damage. Anyways guys, that'll be it for this video. If you thought this video helped you out and you'd like to help support the channel, please consider subscribing or leaving a like down below. Thank you for watching.